what did Trump's first wife say the reading material on his night table was? I can tell you, Mein Kampf. It's German for my struggle, which is you couldn't read it if you actually tried to read it. And you just can't. It's indecipherable. I would assign it to my students, but I don't want to bore them to death. But to put what you put on your night table, I used to put Playboy magazine on my night table. I never thought about putting Mein Kampf on there.
All right, James, now our listener questions. We are in a crisis time. We're in a period like we've never seen before, and our listeners are responding with really terrific questions, some of which we cover in the show. So we're trying to pick ones that add even more value. John in Santa Monica, he loves your idea to do a mini convention next summer, moving to the 26 midterms. Has there been any progress?
I mean, it'd take some planning, but I do think that we got, the theory behind it, we've talked about it a lot, is that there's truly depth and talent in the Democratic Party, and the faster that we can get them on the field and people seeing them, and the sooner we can get people like Bernie Sanders and AOC not defining who the party is, the better off we're going to be. It's a very simple equation, and that would get everybody come. By the way, you can invite, if AOC wants to run for president or wants to put a name in power, let her come. Bernie Sanders run twice and lost 2 times. Maybe he wants to take a crack at third time. I have no problem with that. But be sure we get who, in my opinion, are staggeringly more acceptable, staggeringly more talented, staggeringly more articulate candidates.
Well, I certainly agree with that. I'm of a mixed view about the mini convention now, because I am afraid too much of it will be that number 2 guy at the DNC. People complain about we have to man the barricades. I'm not against. I mean, I think your idea is an interesting one, but I think we have to think it through carefully, because it could turn into could turn to exactly what you don't want.
It could, but sometimes you gotta trust, and of course you're gonna have those kind of people that are gonna come out, but I think much more. You're going to have people like our guest today, Governor Andy Beshear. Hopefully, he would be one of the people that will come out and speak to us and tell us. And I could name 5 or 6 other people that are there. So we can't let a bunch of left-wing clowns determine our calendar. And by the way, they deserve a chance to be heard. How do you think they get on stage next to these guys?
Yeah.
Not very well. Not very
James,
well.
we're gonna follow up on that, because Paul in San Antonio asked if it would be foolish to send money to David Hogg in order to sow discord between Democrats. I think that's right down the middle of the plate, James. I mean, there you are. You're ready. They're tossing you a 92-mile-an-hour fast.
Let's say that you've allocated $1,000 for political giving this year. I say 1,000 because it's a number that. So, what do you think is more important? To beat a Democratic incumbent and have a Republican majority, or to spend your money beating Republicans and have a Democratic majority? And there's a simple philosophy I'd like anybody to argue this with me. The worst Democrat is 10 times better than the best Republican. And if you don't have power, if you don't name any committees, you're not naming the committee chairs, you can't pass anything, you have nothing. So what sense does it make for anybody to say, I'm going to spend $20 million primary and other Democrats is $20 million I could spend to beating other Republicans? I don't usually when I disagree with somebody, I don't agree with their point. I could see the point they're making. I think I have a better point. In this instance, I don't even see what they're saying. I don't even concede that this guy even has a point. I don't know what he's talking about. I really don't.
Mike in Minneapolis, Minnesota, says many historians believe that Hitler succeeded in Germany in taking over the levers of power by from 1933 to 38 by going slow. Trump is trying to do it by going fast in 100 days. Could this be his downfall? First of all, Mike, I don't think Hitler went slow. He went slow as far as invading other countries and everything, but he certainly didn't go slow domestically. He was clamping down on Jews right away. He was killing any opposition right away. He was changing the rules in the Reichstag right away. So he really didn't go slow domestically. He waited 4 or 5 years before he started invading other countries. I do think Trump. I think Trump is going so fast, so thoughtlessly, so dangerously, so badly that I think he is hurting himself. Not that if he had been more careful, he would have done better, because he's really engaged in anti-democratic and anti-American ventures. And I think there's that he's going to exhaust himself. He's no young man, and
So,
I think a bad ending is coming. James.
so this whole Hitler Trump question really been put into focus, is really put into focus by the Larry David, Bill Maher piece. And I really want to address this in a serious way. So I listened to POTUS 124 on the satellite, and Michael McConish, who's a guy I go to his show, he's a very personal guy. He's a Philadelphia guy. He said, well, he's not, this is, you may not like Trump, but he's not Hitler and shouldn't be treated that way. Okay. Well, this is my question to Michael McConish. Do we wait until he's Hitler? At what point do you say this guy is a threat to whatever? And by the way, if Michael wants to have people on the show and talk about this, he could have our friend Ann Applebaum, or he could have Timothy Snyder, the great historian at Yale. I could recommend 10 people that McConish could have on his show and talk about authoritarianism, totalitarianism, and how does it triumph? Because it is pointed out, as Larry David did so brilliantly, and as people say, or I'm going to quote the great Barney Fife: "Nip it in the bud." That's what I say. Nip it in the bud. Don't wait. And one more point I would make to the defenders of all of this: what did Trump's first wife say the reading material on his night table was? I can tell you, Mein Kampf. It's German for my struggle, which is, you couldn't read it if you actually tried to read it, and you just can't. It's
Yeah, and
insane.
Pete
But
Hegseth's people at the Pentagon have now banned Maya Angelou's books from the Naval Academy,
what about,
but Mein Kampf is still there. I actually think Mein Kampf,
what about Jackie
right? I
Robinson?
think
We got to
Mein
get
Kampf
rid of
ought to be
him.
there. I think Naval Academy students are right.
Actually,
They
I
should
think it
read it,
should too. I would assign it to my students, but I
right?
don't want to
But to
bore them to death.
ban, the
But
ban,
to put what you put on your
yeah.
night
Oh,
table, I used to put Playboy magazine on my night
James, let's not go
table.
there.
I never thought about putting Mein Kampf on
Our
that.
next question comes from John in Chicago, who says, have you ever seen a time in our country where the Democrats could make substantial gains in rural America?
Well, it's something I think about a lot. First of all, appreciate the question. We can make. We just need to make some gains. Okay. I don't know if culturally, over a period of time of ingrained voting behavior, we can make major gains, but we can certainly do better. And I think you're going to see this in Virginia governor. I think you're seeing it in a lot of these town halls. I expect to have an improved performance in rural America. I really do. And we don't need a lot. We just need a
Right.
little bit.
When you lose 68-31 versus 72 to 27, that's a big difference. That's a big
Yeah,
difference. You do
we
it
can
in,
move a lot.
in
Yes,
25, 30
absolutely.
counties. James
Absolutely.
B in Palo Alto. B, I love the fact you're asking a good question, but
Hmm.
tell us who B is. But B wants to know, is there any reason to believe that either the Democrats, former displaced Republicans, or the intelligence community will leak damaging information to create enough scandal to force Republicans out of office? Two parts there. Number one, there will be a lot of leaks. The leaks are going to take place for a very good reason. They want to save their country. They really know that dangerous things are happening. And that's, leaks, there are all kinds of different motives for leaks, but one of which is when you see something really dangerous occurring, then, you feel, if you're a devoted patriot, even if whether you're in or out of government, That's why you leak stuff. And I think that will happen. There is, in that sense, a deep state, a good deep state, people who have worked in the bureaucracy. Michael Lewis has a terrific new book out about all the valued bureaucrats we have. It's a pejorative term. It shouldn't be. So I think that'll happen. But the second part of your question, B, is enough to create a scandal to force Republicans out of office. I doubt that. I doubt that because who's going to, at least not for the next 2 years, who's going to force them out of office? Not this Justice Department.
Okay, so this is a question that you're qualified to ask. You know, when Winston Churchill talked about how much he drank, and he says, "I've taken more good from alcohol than alcohol has taken bad from me." But what are name three leaks in the span of your career that have occurred that have, or two or one or whatever, that have really kind of changed the course of American history, maybe for the better or worse? I mean, I guess you'd have to say the
Yeah,
Pentagon
I think the
Papers for
Pentagon
sure.
Papers, which I think was handled absolutely almost perfectly, the Snowden documents, which I think weren't handled perfectly, but I think that they made a difference, and I'm sure that one or two more, but not a lot.
But the
Yeah,
Watergate
yeah,
stuff,
yeah, yeah. What?
the point is that the word can it, I'm sure that there's some that have been damning to the country, but I think I would argue on the whole they've had much more
No
plus than
question.
negative. That would be my argument. Not to defend every leaker. And you know, the other thing is when you think somebody may leak something, that could be a curb on more rapacious behavior. I don't know that, but it's something that if I were in that administration, I'd be thinking all the time, somebody's going to leak some shit
Right,
on me. I better
right.
be careful.
When the Times was publishing stories 15, 20 years ago about really illicit wiretaps, they had all sorts of people in administration, even some in Congress, say, no, you're going to really endanger our war against terrorists, national security, and everything. You know something? If they had endangered something, we'd have heard about it by now. It just doesn't happen. One of my favorites was when it was leaked that we were illegally, actually, bombing Cambodia back during the Vietnam War, and they said it was an outrage that to reveal this. And I think it was Ben Bradley who said, "Well, I suspect certainly the Vietnamese knew that we were bombing Cambodia, which meant the Russians knew we were bombing Cambodia, and certainly the Cambodians knew that we were bombing Cambodia, and the only people who didn't know were the American voters." And I think that's true in a lot of these.
Secret bombing raids of people that are being bombed while they're
Right,
being bombed.
exactly. James, the final question. This is a good one. James in Canton, Georgia. Where's Canton, Georgia?
I do not know, and I hate to say that. I pride myself
Yeah.
on being pretty knowledgeable
Let's look it
about.
up, and we'll talk about it next week.
Yeah, right, for sure.
He has the donor class become too separated from voters.
Uh, I uh, that's a good question, and it deserves some thought. I think the donor class is getting increasingly pragmatic. It was always thought that you had just some of Democratic
Mm-hmm.
donors, okay, that they were more progressive, uh, more liberal than the average Democrat. I think that's changed. That I think that they are increasingly pragmatic. I can't tell you that they're not totally divorced from but not as
Mm-hmm.
much as you think. Not. I would say it's increasingly become. Looking at Canton, Georgia, it's a little bit north. It's north of Atlanta. I think the donor class has become
Mm-hmm.
more pragmatic. I do. I think that's a fair thing. Now, what there are two different parts. There's a lot of online donors, of small donors, we call them direct mail donors. They do tend to respond to more left wing appeals, but the bigger donors a lot less.
Okay. Hey, James, just as a quick aside, I noticed that the New Republic, which I hadn't read for years, and now they do really good stuff. They are real. He is
Michael
terrific,
Tomasky
and
does a
they're
good job there.
and they're
Yeah, he's good.
struggling, and they put out a little appeal for help. I sent them a little bit of money. I think the New Republic is important to keep going. So anybody
I do
out there
too.
is interested,
It's
take a
got
look at it.
a yeah, do what I do. Pay for the subscription anyway. That'll help some, but it's a glorious publication. It has a glorious history. They've had ups and downs like any publication that's going on like that. But I think they do really good stuff. I think Michael Tomasky is a really good editor, and I would recommend anybody to, if you can't send them a check, at least go behind the paywall and pay them and try to help these guys
Yep,
because they do good
absolutely. It's
work.
the New Republic. Okay, thank you. We'll be back with another great show next week.